Welcome, my dear students of class 10 to my history revision class. Now, in my revision class for this lesson, the rise of assertive nationalists, the following points I am going to re-explain. Point number 1, the assertive nationalists. 2, methods and achievements of the assertive nationalists. 3, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. 4, Bipin Chandra Pal. 5, Lala Lajpat Rai. And 6, similarities between the moderates and assertive nationalists. Now, first point, the assertive nationalists. Who were known as the assertive nationalists? I am going to discuss, my dear students. The assertive nationalists were, the leaders of aggressive nature. The assertive nationalists did not believe in patience. Their action was aggressive and violent. They thought that the British would not understand the language of love and sympathy. That's why they must have to be violent while producing their demands. Otherwise, the British would not accept any of their demands. If they did not like to accept their demands, they would continue revolutionary activities against the British government. Otherwise, the British would not accept any of their demands. In the second phase of the national movement, there emerged a new and a younger group of leaders within the Congress who did not compromise, who did not agree with the methods and ideology of the early nationalists. And this group is known as Angry Young Men, stood for complete Swaraj, complete independence, and to be achieved by more self-reliant methods. They also wanted to have a mass base for their movement, and this group of leaders came to be known as assertive nationalists. They were so called because they had a different outlook that advocated active resistance to British imperialism. They condemned the British government, the British rule in India, and held it responsible for the country's downfall. They called upon the people of India to make sacrifices for the sake of the country. And not only that, 3 prominent leaders of this group were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai. They are famous as Lal Bal Pal. Now, what were the causes for the rise of assertive nationalism in India? Recognition of the true nature of the British rule. The efforts made by the early nationalist leaders through their writings, agitation and petitions. 3 P's, prayer, petitions and protest to the British government, exposed the true character of the British rule in India. It was felt that the British rule was responsible for the economic ruin of India and her growing poverty. Some of the political events from 1892 to 1885 to 1905, like the reduction in the number of Indian members in the Calcutta Corporation, the restrictions on the press, etc., made India realize that instead of giving them more rights, the British were taking away their few existing rights. And all this convinced the Indians that India could not make any progress unless the British imperialism was stopped, was replaced by a government run by them. Thus, the assertive nationalist ideology found favor with the masses. They got inspiration from the masses, and masses became a part of their movement, the national movement. Now, what was the reason? What was the reason? The growing consciousness came among the Indians. It was the efforts of the nationalist writers who encouraged the agitators and blamed the British and British rule for the poverty of people of India. Leaders of the new phase, new ideology made all efforts to develop self-respect and self-confidence among the Indian people. They left no stone unturned in encouraging the concept of assertism. So assertive nationalist leaders like Aurobindo Ghosh, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal asked the nationalists to rely on abilities of the Indians. Bipin Chandra Pal reminded the people self-help and self-sacrifice is the real force in the field of nationalism. He quoted it. That's why they needed mass struggle, they needed mass action. The assertive leaders encouraged the mass and taught the people that the remedy of their sad condition lay in their hands. So they must have self-effort, self-confidence. Swami Vivekananda said, the only hope of India is from the masses. The upper classes are physically and morally dead. Who said it? Swami Vivekananda. Thus there was the realization that only the masses could make the immense sacrifices for the country needed to win freedom. Now, influence of international events. There are certain international events, as I mentioned in my previous class, that the defeat of Russia at the hands of a small country of Asia, Japan, encouraged Indian revolutionaries to be united against the British oppression, British law, British rule in India. Besides, the the destruction of the Ottoman Empire throughout the country also encouraged Indian revolutionaries to be united. And then another thing is that disintegration of the Tsarist rule in Russia encouraged Indian revolutionaries, encouraged them to be united against the British oppression, against the British rule in India. My dear students, this is the reason almost all people of India, they got themselves united and involved in Indian national movement under the assertive leaders. That's why the international events, especially Ethiopia, Abyssinians in Ethiopia, Russia, South Africa, where Gandhiji went to support the stance of the Indian people, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale also encouraged him to come back to India and start a national movement from the country for the sake of motherland. And then he declared Bal Gangadhar Tilak to be his mentor. And now another important thing is that the achievements, there are certain achievements of the assertive nationalists. What was the technique and method of the early nationalists? They adopted the technique and method of the early nationalists. One of the most important methods the early nationalists adopted was number one, Swadeshi, where number one, Swadeshi, and number two, boycott. Swadeshi means production necessary items in one's own country and using them for one's use without being dependent on imported goods or foreign goods. So Swadeshi idea was popularized by occasional bonfires of foreign cloths, salt and sugar. And now boycott, what is boycott? Boycott means Swadeshi and boycott are the two sides of the same coin. Why? Because Tilak said, when we accept Swadeshi, we must boycott foreign goods. Economic boycott of foreign goods and use of Swadeshi was designed to encourage Indian industries and provide people with more opportunities for employment. It also proved as a most effective weapon for harming British interest in India. Lala Lajpat Rai said, we desire to turn our faces away. Lala Lajpat Rai rightly said, quote, we desire to turn our faces. We desire to turn our faces away from government house and turn them to hearts of people. This is the spiritual significance of boycott movement. Full stop, unquote. It was the great quotation of Lala Lajpat Rai. So this is about the methods of the early nationalists. Now, what are the achievements of the this is about the methods of the assertive nationalists. And what are the achievements of the assertive nationalists? There are certain achievements of the early assertive nationalists. Number one, they gave new slogans to the Indian nationalist movement like non-cooperation, passive resistance, mass agitation, and self-reliance. Number two, through their writings and speeches, they infused in the Indians the spirit of active nationalism. It was their efforts that produced a class of revolutionaries willing to sacrifice their lives and property for the sake of their motherland. They exposed the true character of the British and believe in the sense of justice and fair play of the British rulers. Who were they? They were early nationalists, but the assertive nationalists condemned it. They depended on self-reliance and promoted by setting up Swadeshi and boycott issues. Jamshedji Tata established iron and steel industry, despite the fact that the industry had a long period industry. Setting up a industry would nothing but a long period of struggle against the British. But he did not mind it, but invested his money and set up one iron and steel industry at Jamshedpur. Bengal chemical works also were set up during this phase. Even Rabindranath Tagore also set up a Swadeshi Bhandar. So they declared that what India needed was total freedom from the British rule. Many new educational institutions were set up during Swadeshi period, during Swadeshi movement. The National Council of Education was set up in the year 1906. It later developed into Jadavpur University, and the movement, which had started from Bengal, soon after it spread to other parts of different countries of India. And Swadeshi and boycott issue had become an all-Indian character, and because of the contributions of the assertive nationalists. So it was because of the efforts and sacrifices of the assertive nationalists that the partition of Bengal was finally annulled or withdrawn in the year 1911. This gave fresh self-confidence to Indian nationalists. So these are the achievements of the assertive nationalists. And last, some similarities between the early nationalists and the moderates and the assertive nationalists. What are the similarities between them? Both of them felt the true character of the British. Both of them strongly condemned the system of unfair taxes. Both of them tried to make sure that the British would safeguard the interest of Indian people along with the interest of them. But both of them at the same time, but there were some differences between these two. Number one, the early nationalists wanted to confine the confine the Swadeshi movement or anti-partition movement within Bengal itself, but the assertive nationalists wanted to scatter the revolutionary ideals against the partition of Bengal throughout the whole India. So this is the basic difference between the early nationalists or moderates and the assertive nationalists. And another thing is that, the Gandhiji, who was the forerunner, Tilak, who was the forerunner of Gandhiji, he also introduced the idea of Swaraj and encouraged Gandhiji to start working from our country, India. As a result, Gandhiji returned back to India and started his agitations from our country for the sake of motherland. And Mahatma Gandhi, For several times he was imprisoned by the British for the sake of the country, and had made an example of establishing active participation in Indian politics. That's why it encouraged Indian nationalists, Indian national movement, assertive nationalism, and assertive nationalists. Besides the role of Tilak's self-patriotism, Tilak's strong determination also encouraged the masses. Now, Tilak established Home Rule League. Tilak set up Home Rule League at Pune in the year 1916 to attain self-government and within the British Empire by constitutional means. Tilak started two important newspapers, Maratha and Kesri, Maratha in English and Kesri in Marathi, and soon after he also published other newspapers and praised nationalism and taught the people to be courageous and self-reliant. And so this is about Bal Gangadhar Tilak. And then next I'm going to discuss about the role of Bipin Chandra Pal. Who was Bipin Chandra Pal? Bipin Chandra Pal, also known as the father of revolutionary thought in India. He started his political career as a social worker, social reformer, and attached to the Brahmo Samaj. He visited a number of European countries and the United States of America. It was during these visits he observed how people resisted foreign domination. In the year 1886, he joined the Indian National Congress. He was actually also a journalist. As a journalist, he worked for the Bengali public opinion and the Tribune and the New India. From there, he propagated his brand of nationalism. His national education, Bipin Chandra Pal wanted national education to be the basis of freedom movement. And Bipin Chandra Pal wanted to remove social and economic evils from the grassroots level of the society. He opposed the caste system. He advocated widow remarriage. He favored women education and believed that Muslims, women could develop themselves through their education and education of science. He stressed the need to develop indigenous industries in the country. He pressed the ideals of French Revolution, the American War of Independence, in order to encourage the Swadeshi and boycott movement, eradicate poverty and unemployment. To establish equality in society, Bipin Chandra Pal, demanded 48 hours of work in a week for an increase in the wages. This very personality left his last breath in the year 1932. He is Bipin Chandra Pal. And finally, I am going to discuss about Lala Lajpat Rai. Lala Lajpat Rai, he was from Punjab. He was actually a eminent lawyer and joined Indian National Movement, Arya Samaj movement, and he strongly criticized Lord Curzon's partition of Bengal. He joined the Congress in the year 1888 and remained its worker till the end of his life. He joined the Assertive Nationalists in the year 1907. He carried on agitation against the agrarian policy of the British government. He was arrested and deported along with Sardar Ajit Singh to Mandalay. But Lala Lajpat Rai supported workers' movement, and in 1922 he became the first president of All India Trade Union Congress. In the same year, he was elected president of the Indian National Congress. He became a member of the Servants of India Society. In the year 1922, he was arrested along with other leaders, and on his release he joined Motilal Nehru and his Swaraj Party. In the year 1923, Lala Lajpat Rai was elected to the Central Legislative Assembly. He, however, left the Swaraj Party because he did not share his political philosophy. Lala Lajpat Rai, he started the monthly magazine, The Young India, and spread the message of the right of India and to attain Swaraj. Lala Lajpat Rai founded Punjabi Bande Mataram and People, this type of weekly English newspapers. He also wrote a book of national education and that called for reform of the educational system. As a social reformer, Lala Lajpat Rai, established orphanages, health centers, hospitals and schools, etc., etc. He set up servants of the People's Society for the welfare of the downtrodden and outcasts. His political work, through his writings, The Young India, he pressed assertive nationalism in the year 1928 while processing the Lahore session of the Congress while processing the Simon Commission at Lahore railway platform. He was charged with he was attacked by the British police, and the lathi blow due to lathi blow of the British police, he was severely injured and was sent to the hospital. And while staying there, while lying on the bed, he realized that the time he was going to leave this world forever. That's why he said rightly, "Lathi blows inflicted on me," he said, quote, "Lathi blow inflicted on me would prove someday as nails in the coffin of the British Empire," full stop, unquote. So what he predicted came to be true. Finally, India became a free country, and Lala Lajpat Rai was no more, but India, what he quoted came to be true. India became a free country. The British had to leave the country forever, and Indians the Indian nationalists were able to make their country free from British control. So the revision of this lesson is completed. The entire portion of teaching as per the syllabus of first terminal revision process is completed, my dear students. Thank you. Now you have to learn properly. You have to understand all the points properly so that you can score good marks. Thank you.